True story. A kid was throwing a fit in Toys R Us because he couldn't get the toy that he wanted. I saw that and I looked at my dad and I said, "You'd kill me if I did that, right?" He looked at me and said, "Yep." Man, he was so proud of me that day, he didn't even buy me a toy. Yeah, Dad, I'm not bitter. So, every time I heard the story of Moses and the burning bush, I was so confused. How in the world did this dude argue and talk back with God so much and not get burned by the fire or something? No comprehendo. Little Alex was thinking, how do I argue and still get my toy? Many years later, older Alex finally understood what was going on between God and Moses. And honestly, I would have never guessed what it was. Oh, and if this video can get 50 likes, I'm gonna make sure my dad finally buys me a toy. He still tells this story, and I still haven't gotten a toy. And it was my good behavior. Thanks for clicking on this video of Cinco Stones. This is a part of this playlist. It's me going through the book of Exodus and bite-sized lessons and revisiting stories with new information and perspectives I know you haven't heard before. So I hope that these videos can put some pep in that step, some pride in that stride as you walk with God daily. So when I was a kid, I always heard the story of Moses and the burning bush kind of like this. Moses saw a bush on fire, takes a double glance, and notices it's not actually burning. So he goes over there and checks it out, because what else are you gonna do in the desert? And it says his name 2 times. Moses replies, "That's my name, don't wear it out," thus making him the first person to say it. And cool. You should stop that. You're not funny. That's less funny than it is informative. Okay, so after God says Moses' name twice, he then tells him to take off his sandals because, well, it's holy ground. And then he goes on to give his own introduction. Moses is like now, "Oh snap!" and covers his face, and he was afraid to look at God. Then God goes on to tell Moses his plan to use Moses to save God's people, aka the Israelites, aka the Hebrews. Then I just remember Moses saying like, "I can't," aka no. And they do this back and forth for like 5 times before God finally gets mad at him and forces him to go with his brother Aaron. Super confused would be how little Alex would describe this story in 1 word. Yeah, he wasn't the best at math back then. But even as an adult, I roughly thought the same thing and was still confused by Moses' actions. Many of you, like myself, might have considered that Moses was respectfully questioning what God had for him, because we're allowed to ask questions. But nope, that's not it necessarily. I believe one of the best tools for reading the Bible is curiosity. We assume so much when we read the Bible and don't take a second thought as to what's actually happening and why. I want to point out the strange decisions made so maybe you, like myself, can be better equipped to read the Bible with a curious mind moving forward. So with that being said, let's just jump into our first clue. For a long time, I couldn't understand, how old are you? I couldn't understand why Moses hid his face from a bush in fear. Was he afraid God was mad at him? Was he afraid to look at a bush? It wasn't actually God. It's because Moses had a good understanding of who God was, enough to know that you don't look at him, not even a representation of him. In his culture, it was disrespectful to look at a superior in the eyes, or directly at it in this case. If I've made it too confusing, let me say it again. Moses understood the glory and honor that was being shown to him at this very moment and was trying to show mad respect. So if we think Moses was afraid of disrespecting God and then like being killed for it, then why in the world would the next thing out of his mouth be a hot nah? In fact, why would he even respectfully question at this point? How does Moses protest 5 times before God finally gets mad at him and forces him to go anyways? Not all of those protests were the same. 4 of the 5 were a show of humility and respect towards God. And the proof is in God's response to Moses. You see, Moses' first protest was basically, "Why me? I'm a nobody." And that's not even true. He was a somebody. This dude was the most well-educated Hebrew alive and probably one of the most educated people in the world. Moses was so thankful for this opportunity, again, to free the Hebrews. So Moses protests in a sign of humility and gratitude. God understands our culture and understands how we can show respect. There are ways in which God demands to be shown respect, removing your sandals on holy ground. And then there are ways in which we can show respect in our own way, like not giving eye contact to a superior. Personally, one of the ways I show respect to God is I always capitalize any pronoun in reference to God, even if it's in my personal journal. It's just one of the ways I like to show God honor. Is there any personal way that you show respect and honor to God? I was talking to YouTube. I don't bark when I pray. Okay, so nowhere in scripture do you ever see someone question God and God just replies, happy to explain himself. He always chooses his words wisely and doesn't repeat himself. So in contrast, God's response here is kind. But most importantly, it tells us information about what is happening and how God is going to use Moses. God could have simply laid it all out at once for Moses, but since he knows everything, he allowed Moses to humble himself. Thus, God gave Moses the important information in pieces. Now, this isn't to say that the protests Moses makes to humble himself before the Lord means nothing. His questions had purpose and meaning, but they didn't show a lack of faith or willingness. Yet, we should think of it as a 2-for-1 action. First, we should always humble ourselves in gratitude for God's grace to choose us and to do his will through us. Second, we should check with God about how he wants us to do it. Moses wasn't showing a lack of faith by asking questions. He was trying to get clarity where he had confusion. How many times has God given you a mission or a goal and you're like, cool, thanks, and go and try to accomplish it on your own, not giving a single thought that God might also have a specific way he wants you to accomplish that goal or mission? I think I've lost count how many times. I haven't. Through this one example, you can start to see God does care about the details of our life. He's not a big picture kind of guy who just lets you figure out the details. Now, unlike this story, you probably won't get a lot of your answers up front, and that's a good thing, even if it doesn't feel like it. So as I was saying earlier, more proof that Moses was being humble and not wicked was how God responded to his protest. In verse 12, God tells Moses he'll be with him and even gave him a sign. Now, if you're noticing that God was going to give Moses a sign to prove that he was going to be with Moses during the Exodus, after it happens, and you're wondering how that works, because signs are before, not after, my next video will break this down and other interesting facts and observations of the conversation between God and Moses. It's gonna be cool. So for my final thought, Yes? Hey, I have a question. Why did Moses call Pharaoh the king of Egypt when he actually knew that he was a pharaoh and not a king? That's actually a great question. That question too, along with others, will be answered in my next video. I hate waiting. So as I was saying, my final thought on this is a lot of us might start to get this twisted understanding of destiny or fate, or if you have a Christian worldview, God's will. You might conclude that no matter what you do, you can't mess up God's blessing for your life. But there are plenty of times where people like David or Saul who mess up the blessings God gave them. Even Moses, near the end of his life, messed things up a little bit. God has promises that cannot be broken, but he has blessings he will allow us to ruin or delay. But don't allow this to make you worried about being good enough. Remember, God is a good father. It's who he is. It's who he is. If you thought this video was helpful or entertaining, please give it a like so YouTube knows it's a good video and it will show up in search results better. I hope you enjoy how much I'm changing things up, and if you're still listening, you obviously really enjoyed this video, so you should subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss my next video. It's gonna be lit! Oh, and if this video can get 50,000 likes, oh my goodness, that's way too many.